Hello! So we all know that Oda loves pulling from different myths, beliefs, poems, literature, life. He loves to pull from our world and then make it into his own and build it into his story to make his world alive. And for me, one of the really fun things about being a part of this fandom is trying to hunt down those pieces of literature, those poems, those legends, and try to see how they compare to the story and maybe what we can guess if we've figured out what he's pulling from correctly. So, ever since the last chapter that I've read, 1113, where we learned that the world as we know it is sinking into the sea, as well as knowing that destroying Lulisha caused the floodwaters to rise, we realized that the floodwaters have been rising for a long time and the world has been reacting to this for a long time. I made a video on Friday talking about that specifically, and in all of this, I've been hyperfixating, and I ended up starting to look into flood legends around the world, because there are hundreds. There are hundreds of different cultures that have their own great flood legend. Naturally, I went to Japanese lore first and learned nothing very unhelpful, that there's no great flood legend in Japan, but I have found one in China that I actually think fits this story really well. So we're going to talk about the Chinese Great Flood legend. I'm going to retell it to you, and then we're also going to theorize from there, see the comparisons between the Great Flood legend and this story, and then kind of look into the future, maybe what can we guess what direction Oda might be going in based off of what we've learned. Now, there are several versions of this Chinese Great Flood legend just because this takes place so long ago. The story is ancient and it was passed down orally for many years before it ever got written down. And when it was written down, it's been written down with several variants. So I've done my best to hunt down English translations of the legends of the different versions of the legends, where I've been able to read through them, do research on them, trying to understand which versions are more commonly told and accepted, and which ones are a little bit more outliers. And what I'm doing now is condensing the story to you, doing my best to honor the most commonly told versions of the legends, but when I pull from outliers, I will let you know. And I'm going to compare it all to our story as it is today, because there are a lot of parallels and it's really fun. I've done my best to honor the story in my research and in how I'll be telling it today, as well as in my pronunciations, but anything that I get wrong, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Okay, so our story starts with the Emperor Yao. Now, some versions say that there were 5 emperors that ruled together before there was a singular emperor system in place. Some say that it was a singular emperor, it was Yao, and he had 4 advisors known as the 4 mountains, sometimes translated as the 4 elders. Either way, there were 5 figureheads or 5 people kind of co-ruling in one manner or another, and Yao is the main ruler that we're following. So this great torrential flood came in and was destroying all of China. It was ruining homes, it was killing people, destroying their agriculture. It was terrible. So Emperor Yao sought out someone to help him try to resolve this flood issue. So under the advisement of the 4 mountains, Yao was encouraged to enlist the help of Guen. Guen's plan was to build dams and dikes in order to stop the flood, to block it from continuing to destroy their lands and their people. Now, the main mythological telling, which I believe is the most commonly told telling, is that Guen actually stole self-expanding soil from the supreme deity. The audacity to steal from the supreme deity is just wild. So he stole this soil in order to build up these dams and dikes to block the waters. Now, this went on for 9 years that Guen was building up these walls, these dams, these dikes in order to stop the water, but what would happen is the water would build up, there would eventually be cracks in the walls, and they would break, causing even greater flooding to happen, even greater catastrophes, even greater losses of lives. So he was failing. Different versions of the story count it differently. Some say that it was the intervention of the gods that initially brought the floods on in the first place. Some say that it was just a natural disaster. Some say that it was the intervention of the gods that caused his plans to fail because he used methods of trickery. And some versions say that it was because Guen used unnatural means to try to resolve the problem. Instead of working with nature, he worked against nature. Now, I think that the tie-in for this could potentially be Oda's use of devil fruits. Vegapunk specifically said that the reason the ocean is against devil fruits is because they're unnatural. And because Guen's struggle was because he tried to create unnatural solutions to work against Mother Nature instead of working with Mother Nature to find a solution that works with nature and with humanity. Because of that, be it because of the intervention of the gods or just because this failed because it wasn't the correct method, either reason it failed, and it was because of the unnatural choices that he made. It should also be noted that during the 9 years of failed attempts to tame these floods, the only survivors of the floods were people who were able to be on higher ground, build on higher ground, live on higher ground. This obviously ties back to the series as well because of what we talked about in the last video. A lot of civilizations seem to be flood-proofed, and a lot of them are on higher ground, but then also just the fact that the nobles and the world government have kicked people off of the red line who were living there, to include slaughtering the Lunarians and the Buccaneers in order to occupy this land. But even though economically and agriculturally and just getting resources to the nobles, it doesn't really make sense to be living on top of the highest place in the ocean. Except that, well, flooding, it makes sense. And for this particular legend, that's the only way to survive. Anyway, after 9 years of failed efforts, a new emperor came into power. His name was Emperor Shun, and he did many great things, great advancements in China, but also he exiled Guen for his failures. So he was exiled to Feather Mountain, there he died, and there his son was also born. Now there are many different accountings on how his son was born, but my favorite is that his son, Yu, emerged from his decaying corpse, his decaying belly specifically, and that was how he was born. The reason I like this version is because, once again, this is reminiscent of the devil fruits. A devil fruit user dies, their devil fruit then respawns, and the person who eats it is the new user of that fruit. So when Guen died, his son, Yu, he married, but then he took on the mantle of his father. He was then called to be the new person to finish out what his father started, what his father was supposed to accomplish, and he was the one that ended up succeeding in saving China from this issue. Yu's method was to organize tribes from across the region to build an irrigation system at points along the river to redirect the current of the sea. Yu was known to have worked relentlessly. For 13 years, he spent his days and nights working in camaraderie with these people from around the region, calluses covering his hands and feet, sleeping with them, eating with them. They developed a brotherhood, and they worked together relentlessly to the point of Yu being known to have neglected his family because he was so, this is all I can do. This is my entire purpose is dedicating myself to saving my people. In order to drain the 9 streams into the 4 seas, I deepened the channels and canals and connected them with the rivers. Overall, it took 13 years to complete this mission, and along the way, Yu received mythological help as well. Because of his diligence, because of his hard work, because of his good-heartedness, he ended up gaining assistance from the likes of receiving a map of sorts that allowed him to understand the water systems and the mountain areas that he was working with. It's said that this was delivered to him either by being able to read what is essentially a poneglyph, ancient writings on the shell of a turtle. Some versions say it was the Earl of the River who gave him charts, and then some say that they were jade tablets that had a trigonometric chart that looks honestly a lot like the map of Enislabi and Water 7 and The point is he got poneglyphs to help him be able to map out where he needed to go and what he needed to do to get to his end goal. He also received assistance from a yellow dragon and a black turtle. The black turtle he rode on, and the yellow dragon helped him to dig canals, and he fought various creatures. I also want to tell an outlier side tangent for this story that I don't think is one of the most frequently told versions, but in one version, you also can transform into a bear to dig canals, and he has a drum that he keeps next to him, and when he beats the drum, it's meant to signal to his wife to come and bring him food to give him energy so that he can keep going, to restore his strength so that he can keep working. And then there's like this whole thing about her getting turned to stone, and then he has to ask for the stone to open up so he can get his unborn child out and raise the child. And anyway, the point is that there is a side tangent story about drums that summon his allies to bring him resources like food to keep him going. And the tie-in to One Piece for that is obvious: the drums of liberation, which awaken the Iron Giant and called to Zunisha and all the things. Plus, you know, getting fed to restore his... Back to the story. The big takeaway that you had in all of this was that a virtuous ruler would receive help from the gods. The idea is that his father didn't use virtuous methods, but Yu did. He worked relentlessly, he didn't use trickery, he united groups of people to work together, and he showed honor in his actions, and that's what gave him the assistance that he needed to fully complete this goal of his. The story ended with Emperor Shun actually giving Yu his emperor status. When it was time for him to step down, instead of giving the emperor role to his son, he ended up giving it to Yu, who initially turned it down, but because the people loved him so greatly, he was encouraged to take it and agreed, and that began the first dynasty. There's also some mentions in some of the versions of when he takes the emperor seat, that he gathers the tribes from all over that he worked with, and I mean, it reads like he threw a big party. Anyway, the legend that he is known for is Great Yu controls the waters. So there's obviously a lot of parallels just on the face of the story. As we're telling it, we can pull a bunch of different things. A couple of things that weren't directly mentioned, that I didn't directly mention as I was telling the story. Guen tried to solve the flood problem for 9 years before the new emperor was enlisted and he was banished. The time between the Void Century and now is 800 to 900 years ago. Joy Boy left an apology for breaking his promise and promising that another would come to fulfill the promise, to finish what happened. Obviously, the correlation here is that Guen was Joy Boy. He was the one who initially tried to save the people. He was unable to, for whatever reason. I have some theories. We're going to talk about it in a minute. He was unable to fulfill it, but he promised someone else to come. In the original story, in the legend, it was his son, Yu. In One Piece, it's the next carrier of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. In the legend, it's believed that the Four Mountains were correct to advise Yao to enlist Guen as the one to try to tame the floods because it was his descendant that finished the job, that was able to succeed in carrying out the will of his father. In this story, in One Piece, Luffy is the one, the successor of this devil fruit, that is meant to carry on the will of Joy Boy and complete what he started, and complete it successfully and save, well, in One Piece, it's the whole world. Couple of other things. It should be noted that the Iron Giant was attempting to climb the Red Line. Maybe he's a part of Joy Boy's crew and he was attempting to do this work with the Red Line, or the dams, as the parallel, but they weren't able to utilize the ancient weapons for whatever reason, which is why they failed. Also notable that Joy Boy is the one that called them the ancient weapons. At least that's the implication in this passage from Fishman Island. So maybe it's because the weapons were for this purpose. Not literal weapons, which is why Shirahoshi's weapon doesn't really sound that dangerous, but weapons for the purpose of completing this mission, this prophecy. It's pretty much confirmed, at least I think, that Luffy is going to tear down the Red Line, which I know has been theorized for a long time, but I really think that Poseidon basically said that's what's going to happen. He said the prophesied one is going to destroy the gates of Fishman Island. Fishman Island is under the Red Line. I think in order to destroy the gates, you have to destroy the Red Line. Let me know if I'm misinterpreting that. But I don't think you can destroy the Red Line without the ancient weapons, and for whatever reason, it seems Joy Boy wasn't able to actually utilize them. And for Luffy to succeed, he's going to be uniting all the races. I think we can kind of all agree that that seems to be the goal of One Piece, is at the end for the races to be united and no longer divided. The world government, the nobles, Emu, the elders are dividing the races. They're pushing the fishmen out. They're destroying an entire races of people for sport or so that they can take over their homes. There are races that are currently divided among themselves. The long-armed tribe and the long-armed tribe and the long-leg tribe fighting amongst each other. The races are divided. And Luffy, I think the implication is clear in the series, is going to be the uniter of those things. That's exactly what you did. You united the tribes, brought them together to work together for this means, which is part of why he was so beloved by the people. Maybe even at the end of the series, Luffy will be offered the throne, Emu's empty seat, and he'll turn it down because Pirate King is all he wanted to be, and that's Oda's version of Luffy taking on the Emperor's seat. It's to take on the Pirate King's seat. I don't know. Oh, also Vegapunk's morality. That's another thing that was brought up in the last chapter when he was like, I don't want you to call this person good or evil. I don't know their intention. I do wonder if we're continuing to draw parallels with this legend and One Piece, maybe Emu, back in the Void Century, back when Joy Boy was alive and Emu first took over the empty throne, the kingdoms were first, not really kingdoms united, but the rulers of the 20 kingdoms all became world nobles, except for Vivi's family line. Maybe Emu initially enlisted Joy Boy to prevent the flooding that was occurring. Maybe there was a flood that happened during the Void Century and now another flood is coming again. I don't know all of the details of it, but anyway, Emu enlisted Joy Boy to be the one to save them, and he failed. For whatever reason, he failed, and he had to write an apology, and both the Iron Giant and Zunesha are still waiting and still regretting that they weren't able to succeed at that time. Maybe Emu, after Joy Boy's failure, decided to try to handle the situation on his own. He's trying to handle it through might, through force, through a dictatorship, through division. His methods are bad, but maybe he's still trying to save the people of the world that he deems worthy of being saved, and he's using his own methods, his own unnatural ways to do so. But more evidence that Emu is trying to find a method to resolve this issue. He's just using unnatural means. We also have the whiskey, what's that? Tequila Bridge. The Tequila Bridge that I mentioned in the last episode that's being built up. Obviously, that's not a long-term solution because that could get flooded as well, but it's been built up for a long time. Tom was forgiven for his perceived crimes against the world government so that he could build the sea train. And there are other examples as well of what the world government seems to be doing to try to tack band-aids on this flood issue. And back to mentioning that in the legend, Guen was considered the correct choice because his will was carried out by his son, Yu. And that is, because of that, it's considered that that was the correct decision. It just took a long time for that to be fulfilled. And obviously someone carrying out another person's will after their death is a common theme in One Piece. The next generation is a big theme in One Piece, but also things being passed down generation to generation should also be a sign to us of these parallels. Poseidon was passed down through the mermaid princess genealogy. Tom passed down the blueprints for remaking Pluton if that were ever necessary. And Odin's letter said that when they found the One Piece, they learned about the Will of D, they learned about the Void Century, they learned what the One Piece was, and they learned what the ancient weapons were. And when he came home, he wanted to open the gates of Wano. Maybe because it was time for him to stop being the generational guardian of that ancient weapon. Or maybe because he knew that the artificial walls had to come down in order for this prophecy to be fulfilled. All right, continuing on this speculative track as we continue to make parallels and then guess at what could be coming because of those parallels. In Oda's story, it is possible that Joy Boy didn't fail because of trickery or because of dishonesty or because of not noble and honorable leadership. It's possible that Joy Boy just failed because it wasn't the right time. So my working theory that I'm not ready to die on the hill of, I'm not ready to die on Feather Mountain for this, but Yu came to the conclusion after he completed his goal, after he received the help that he needed to complete the goal to save the people, he came to the conclusion that if you exercise virtuous governance, you will receive the help that you need. The gods will assist you. I wonder if that in One Piece would more be tied towards the world government, because Imu did raise to power, because he did take over the empty throne in Joy Boy's time. The governance that was leading the world was not virtuous. So because of that, Joy Boy couldn't gain access to what he needed in order to fulfill what he needed to fulfill this prophecy. My guess, what the narrative I'm making up in my head, is that in this version of the story, Joy Boy isn't the one that erected the walls of the Red Line to create this blockade, but rather he wanted to take them down, which is why the Iron Giant was climbing the Red Line, because they were trying to find a way to take them down. Again, I know that people have been theorizing for a long time that the Red Line has to fall at the end of the series. I think that's true. I think that that's pretty much been said blatantly in the story, and I refer you back to this panel. So I think Joy Boy was trying to find a way to bring these walls down because Imu and his elders and his whatever methods he has was the one that brought them up. But that's unnatural. That's an unnatural solution. It's not working with nature and humanity. But he couldn't gain access to the ancient weapons, to what he needed in order to do what he needed to do to fulfill the prophecy, because of the non-virtuous governance. Maybe they maintain control of Uranus, and so Joy Boy couldn't get to all of the ancient weapons. Maybe it's some other method. But I also think that ties into Roger when he arrived at the One Piece and said, we were too early. Also ties into Rayleigh and what he said. Even if I were to tell you all about the history right here, right now, as you are right now, you wouldn't be able to do a thing. No, you take a good long look at the whole world, and who knows, you may even reach a different conclusion to the one we arrived at, because you had a different conclusion of how to resolve this issue, because Luffy may have a different conclusion. Maybe Joy Boy didn't realize he needed to utilize the ancient weapons. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But I do think it ties in somehow, as well as Roger being there too early because the wicked governance was still in power, and Luffy is going to have to disrupt that governance in order to gain access to the ancient weapons that he needs, in order to take down the Red Line, in order to use natural methods to work with nature, like canals and irrigation, to save the world. Are you tracking with me? I feel like I'm over-explaining, but I have so much information that I've crammed into my head rereading these scenes in One Piece and these different versions of this legend and trying to fit it all together that I don't know that I can't tell if I'm distributing the information well or if my brain is just too... Okay, so the next thing, I really like the idea. I really like the, my guess, I think that's fair. I don't even know if you could call it a theory. My guess, I think it would be really cool if Oda were using different flood legends, because again, hundreds across the world. If Oda were using different flood legends in order to represent different regions of One Piece. Obviously we have the Noah waiting for us, which represents Noah's Ark, the biblical flood. I think it would be cool if when we finally get to the climax of the flood, when it's like do or die, now or never, Luffy, it's time to save the world, if Oda shows us different regions of the world and how the flood looks to them in their unique circumstance, in their unique island, in their unique ways that they've fortified against the flood, how this flood looks to them would reflect different floods around the world. So for instance, Zo could represent Mayan legends, and Alabasta could represent Mesopotamian legends, or, you know, fill in blank. I think it would be cool if he just like gave little snapshots of reflecting different flood legends around the world. And then naturally Luffy will use the arc to in this final thing that he's going to do. I know Morge recently put out a video about how Luffy will use the arc to collect the different races and during the big flood, the final flood, you know, save the world in that way. I'm definitely in agreement with that. I think there's been a lot of speculation that the arc has to play a big role in this final flooding, and that collecting people and putting them on the arc it makes sense. It's the natural conclusion. So I'm definitely in alignment with that. I do think that Luffy is going to use the Noah to bring the different races onto the arc during the climax of the flood, and then when the floodwaters recede, maybe when Luffy takes down the red line, you know, and the floods come, he uses the arc, the Noah, to save everyone. But I just wanted to mention that I think it would be cool for Oda to use many flood legends around the world. Some things I don't have an answer for yet. Roger got there too early. That fits with what I'm talking about today. But he also laughed. He saw the One Piece and he laughed. Happily, joyfully it seemed. And all of his crew laughed. Happily, joyfully it seemed. Why? If the answer is you're under a corrupt governance, so it's too soon, that's not really funny, haha. I'm not really sure why Roger would be like, oh, we're too soon. That darn emu. He's the problem. Because they did know about the Void Century, about the Will of D, about the ancient weapons, about what the One Piece is. They had all of these answers. So they might have known about Emu, they might have just known about the nobles, who are also corrupt governance. Regardless, that throws a wrench in my theory a little bit, so I thought I'd throw that out there. Speaking of, the Will of D. I have no idea what that is. I still just don't know, and I don't know how it could fit into this. And Vivi and her entire family line, Lily, I think obviously there's more to it than just Lily is from this time. She didn't want to take on this role with Emu and all the other leaders, and Emu's super sad about it. So Lily is a name that triggers him, and I want to see Vivi because I got a bone to pick with this fan. Like, I don't think that's it. There's obviously more to it, and I don't have any answers by studying this legend. Okay, so that is my retelling of this ancient Chinese flood legend, my connections to it into our story, and a couple of things that we might be able to look into the future and guess, well, will the story look like this then, as Oda tells it in his unique way? Or am I wrong about everything and this isn't connected at all and I'm reaching super hard? I honestly don't care if this theory comes true, if it's right or not. I just really love going down research rabbit holes and studying different historical events or legends or whatever. Anything like this is super fun to me, and trying to tie it into the story. So regardless if any of this is right, it was fun to research, and I hope you had fun listening to me babble on about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have anything to add to it? Do you have holes to poke in it? Probably. Either way, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider sharing it. Please do leave your thoughts in the comments. I very much look forward to continue chatting with you about all this nonsense. I'll see you again soon. Bye.